adding asparagus to our edible ornamental bed, and this is a really ideal place to plant asparagus. Asparagus is a perennial crop, and so it doesn't always lend itself to being used in a vegetable garden, because most vegetable gardens, we disturb the soil each year, and that can disrupt the asparagus bed. But here, we're going to just plant it like any perennial ornamental crop, and it'll be undisturbed. Now you can see I'm preparing a pretty large planting hole. The asparagus crowns that we'll plant have a really wide root system, so we want to make as wide of a hole as possible. Also, I want to prepare the soil well, so I'm digging it fairly deep. It's a good idea to turn the soil up to about 10 inches, even up to 12 inches deep. And also look, we have a really nice rich soil here, but if you have a poor soil or a real heavy clay soil, the asparagus can benefit from adding manure or compost to loosen up the soil and add some organic matter. Now I want my asparagus to be planted about 6 inches deep, so I'm going to get a little bit more out of here. Asparagus is planted from crowns, and a crown is the compressed stem of the plant and its associated root system. You can see here we have a nice long root system, and you can see some of the healthy buds in here that are going to produce spears. Now we want to plant these in March through April when the soils have reached 50 degrees. There's no advantage to planting asparagus too early because they just won't break bud in those damp, cold soils. So go ahead and wait till the soil warms up a bit, and then you want to prepare your planting holes. Now as you can see, we have the really wide hole, and I wanted it large enough to spread these roots out without circling them or cramping them. So I've gotten that pretty good. And I like to put a little clump of soil in the middle underneath the crown and then spread the roots out around it. Now if you're planting in a vegetable garden, you might just dig a long wide furrow and set your plants in at about a 2-foot spacing. But in the ornamental setting, I'm going to give them each their own hole. And a mature plant can actually spread to cover about 3 to 4 foot areas. So you want to give your plants plenty of space. And they also don't like competition. So make sure to look what's around them. Make sure there's not too many plants that are going to compete with your asparagus. So I'm just backfilling to the original soil level. My crown is down in there a good 6 inches. The asparagus will also benefit from a fertilizer treatment with phosphorus. It uses quite a bit of phosphorus, but it's important to test your soil first because that's a nutrient that can tend to build up in the soil. So you want to make sure that the soil test tells you your phosphorus is necessary before you add any. Now once this plant grows up, it's going to produce some beautiful fern-like foliage, and that's another element of asparagus that makes it so nice to use in an ornamental garden. In fact, many of the traditional English cottage-style gardens included asparagus among their plants. Not only are those ferns very beautiful, but they're also producing the energy the plant needs to develop its root system and even produce spears for next season. It kind of stores all that energy up inside the plant. So you don't want to cut the tops of your asparagus off. You want to leave them over into the fall, and then you could cut them over the winter, much like you'd cut back maybe your ornamental grasses. Now, asparagus can be productive for up to about 10 to 20 years, but we don't want to harvest it the first season. We want to give it plenty of time to grow up and establish a nice strong root system. And then even in the second year, we might harvest 2 or 3 of the hardiest spears from each plant, but then leave the rest to come up and produce the foliage. By the 3rd year, our plant will be strong enough that we could harvest all the asparagus we can eat.